Whispers of stone and light. The Museum of the Bible stood like a quiet sentinel on the edge of Washington, D.C., its white stone walls catching the late afternoon sun in soft, golden hues. It was a place where time seemed to slow, where the air carried the faint scent of aged paper and polished wood, and every step echoed with the weight of stories long told. On this crisp autumn day in October, the leaves outside swirled in lazy spirals, painting the ground in reds and golds that mirrored the illuminated manuscripts hidden within. Inside, the halls were hushed, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for what was to come. Elena Petrova had come here not for the crowds, but for the solitude it promised before the event. She was a woman in her late 40s, with lines around her eyes that spoke of winters in Moscow and summers chasing dreams across oceans. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was pulled back simply, and she wore a wool coat that still smelled faintly of the Volga River's damp earth. Elena had left Russia years ago, seeking a life where faith felt less like a chain and more like a gentle hand. Now, living in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, she worked as a translator for old texts, letters from immigrants, diaries of the displaced. It was steady work, but it left her heart wandering, searching for anchors in a world that shifted like sand. Today, she had slipped into the museum early, her ticket clutched in one hand, a worn leather journal in the other. The speech by President Trump was the reason for the bustle that would soon arrive, but Elena sought the quiet galleries first. She wandered into the room of ancient scrolls, where fragments of the Dead Sea writings glowed under soft lights. The air was cool, almost reverent, and she paused before a case displaying a sliver of papyrus, its ink faded but defiant. In the beginning, she whispered to herself, tracing the glass with a fingertip. The words felt foreign on her tongue, shaped by a childhood of Soviet classrooms where God was a myth, not a promise. As she moved deeper, the museum unfolded like a memory, exhibits of illuminated Bibles from medieval Europe, their pages bursting with color, blues like the sky over the Black Sea, golds that rivaled the onion domes of her homeland. Elena sat on a bench, opening her journal to a blank page. She wrote slowly, her pen scratching softly, "What do we carry when we leave everything behind? A name, a prayer, or just the echo of voices we can no longer hear?" The question hung there, unfinished, like so many in her life. Her problem was simple, yet it gnawed at her like the autumn chill seeping through the windows. She missed her mother, gone these 5 years, buried under the birches back in Tula. Letters from her sister, Olga, arrived sporadically, filled with news of grandchildren Elena had never met. But more than that, she missed the certainty of belief, the way her babushka had crossed herself before icons, whispering secrets to saints who never answered back. Here in America, faith felt abundant, yet Elena's own was threadbare, worn thin by crossings and losses. Why come to this speech, then? A friend had urged her. Trump speaks of strength, of roots. Maybe it'll stir something in you. But Elena wondered if it was just another voice in the wind. The museum began to stir. Distant footsteps echoed, growing into a murmur like distant rain. Volunteers in crisp uniforms adjusted velvet ropes, their voices low and efficient. Elena closed her journal and rose, smoothing her coat. She followed the signs to the grand auditorium, a vast space with tiered seats curving like waves toward a stage framed by towering replicas of stone tablets. The lights dimmed slightly, casting long shadows that danced. Across the walls, where projected verses flickered like fireflies, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." She found a seat near the back, in a row half empty still, and settled in. Around her, people filed in, families with wide-eyed children, couples holding hands, a few solitary figures like herself, drawn by curiosity or conviction. The air hummed with anticipation, but it was gentle, not frantic. A soft prelude played from hidden speakers, hymns on harp and flute, notes that lingered like mist. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music wrap around her. She thought of Olga's last letter. "Come home, Lena. The house feels empty without you." But home was a word without borders now, a ache that followed her everywhere. The relatable pull of it all, the quiet longing for connection in a life pieced together from fragments, settled over her like a familiar shawl. Why had she come? To listen, perhaps, to words that might bridge the gap between who she was and who she longed to be. Then, the lights brightened on the stage. A hush fell, deep and profound, broken only by the rustle of programs. President Trump entered from the wings, his steps measured, his presence filling the space without effort. He was dressed in a dark suit, his tie a bold red against the white shirt, hair catching the spotlights in familiar waves. But there was no bombast here, not in this hall of whispers. He approached the podium slowly, placing both hands on its edges as if grounding himself to the earth. The crowd leaned forward, a collective breath held. "Good evening," he began, his voice warm, resonant, carrying the cadence of boardrooms and rallies, yet softened for this place. "It's an honor to stand here, in the heart of something timeless." He paused, letting the words settle, his eyes scanning the room, not with the fire of campaigns, but with a quiet reflection. Elena shifted in her seat, surprised by the calm in his tone. She had expected thunder, not this measured rain. He spoke of the Bible not as a weapon, but as a well, deep, enduring, drawing from it stories of wanderers and exiles. "Think of Abraham," he said, his voice dipping low, almost conversational. "He left his land, his people, for a promise he couldn't see. Crossed deserts, built altars from stones that meant nothing until they did." The words hung in the air, and Elena felt a stir in her chest, like a leaf trembling before the wind. He continued, weaving tales of David's harp in the wilderness, of Ruth gleaning fields in a foreign land. "These aren't just stories," he said, leaning into the microphone. "They're maps for us, for the journeys we all take, whether we admit it or not." Around her, heads nodded, a few tears glistened in the dim light. Elena's hand found her journal again, but she didn't write. She listened, the president's words painting pictures in her mind. The Volga under moonlight, her mother's hands kneading dough for pierogi, the day she boarded the plane with one suitcase and a heart full of questions. The atmosphere thickened, layers of shared humanity building like dust motes in a sunbeam. The stage lights warmed the stone replicas behind him, making the tablets glow as if alive, etched with truths that had outlasted empires. And then, the gentle twist, a moment so subtle it might have slipped past unnoticed, had the room not been so still. As Trump paused to sip from a glass of water, his eyes caught on something in the front row. A young girl, no more than 8, with braids like Elena's had been as a child, held a small drawing aloft, a crayon sketch of Noah's Ark, rainbow arched above wobbly waves. The president smiled, a real one, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "What's that you've got there?" he asked, his voice carrying easily, inviting rather than commanding. The girl stood shyly, her mother nudging her forward. "It's the Ark, sir. For when the floods come." Her voice was small, but clear, threaded with the innocence that cuts deepest. Trump stepped from the podium, descending the stairs to her level. The crowd watched, breath suspended. He knelt, suit jacket straining slightly, and took the drawing gently. "Beautiful," he murmured, studying it as if it were a priceless scroll. "You know, floods come to all of us. But look, there's always that rainbow. God's promise. What's your name?" "Anna," she whispered. "Anna," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Like in the Bible, the woman who waited in the temple, faithful all those years." He handed the drawing back, but not before adding, from his pocket, a small pin shaped like an eagle. "For your bravery." The girl beamed, clutching both treasures, and as he returned to the stage, the room exhaled in a wave of soft applause, not thunderous but warm, like hands held over a fire. Elena felt it then, the twist uncoiling in her like a secret long kept. It wasn't the grand gesture, the kneeling president or the child's gift. It was the echo, the name Anna, pulling at threads of her own story. Her babushka had been Anna Ivanovna, the one who taught her the Lord's Prayer in whispers behind locked doors, when faith was forbidden fruit. The woman who, on her deathbed, pressed a tiny silver cross into Elena's palm. "Carry this light, Malishka. It will guide you home." Elena's fingers brushed the chain around her neck, hidden under her blouse. The cross was there, cool against her skin, a relic she hadn't thought of in months. In that instant, the speech, the museum, the stranger on stage, they all blurred into a single truth. Faith wasn't found in crowds or certainties, but in these quiet intersections where one story brushed another's edge. Trump wrapped his words soon after, not with a flourish but a benediction. "May we all find our rainbows," he said simply, "and remember the stones that hold us steady." The lights rose slowly, the harp resuming its melody, and people rose too, murmuring thanks, sharing glances that lingered. Elena stayed seated a moment longer, the journal open now on her lap. She wrote, "Floods pass. Arcs float. And sometimes, a name is enough to call us back." As she made her way out, the autumn sun had dipped low, casting the museum in amber. The leaves still swirled, but now they seemed like confetti from a private celebration. Elena paused at the entrance, pulling out her phone. She dialed Olga's number, the line crackling across the miles. "Sestra," she said when the voice answered, soft and surprised. "Tell me about the grandchildren. Tell me everything." The conversation stretched into the evening, voices weaving like threads in a tapestry, stories of little feet pattering on wooden floors, of pierogi baked with too much butter, of birches whispering in the wind. Elena walked home under streetlights that flickered like stars, the cross warm now against her heart. Home wasn't a place, she realized, but a promise kept in the carrying. And in the quiet of her apartment, as she lit a single candle and opened her Bible to Ruth, the words came alive again, "Where you go, I will go." The problem that had shadowed her eased, not erased, but transformed, into a gentle ache, one she could hold without fear. Outside, the city hummed its endless song, but inside, Elena Petrova found her pause. A breath, a rainbow after the rain.